And hopefully those of you watching on the webcast are able to see us and hear us clearly. My name is Tom Manatos. I run Tom Manatos Jobs. Tom Manatos Jobs is a website that tries to get as many opportunities out there to people interested in policy, politics, government. And I started it because I was on Capitol Hill working for the House Democratic leadership. And I started getting a lot of job announcements in my inbox. This is before a lot of the communication tools we have today, like Twitter and Facebook. And I figured out I was seeing a lot of job opportunities that I knew a lot of my fellow Democrats at the time who were out there looking to get on the Hill didn't know about. So I started forwarding them to people that I knew who were looking, and it kind of became a thing. I married a wonderful woman, but she's unfortunately a Republican. But she forced me to make it a bipartisan thing. She worked for President Bush. And so my wife and I started the website when I left government. And now we try to get every Capitol Hill policy, private sector, campaign job out there to the masses. And part of finding a job in DC is knowing about them, and hopefully you're subscribing to my site and other services like mine out there. But a key part of getting a job is networking, and that's what we're here to talk about tonight. It's sure, you can find out about the jobs that are on my site or other services. You can network your way to find out about those opportunities, but then how do you cross that threshold to get that job? And right now we're in a huge time of transition. And in this era, this political climate era, there have been waves almost every election, whether it's a Democratic wave or a Republican wave. So hopefully with tonight's discussion, you're going to learn a lot that will apply whether you're a Democrat looking for a job now, you're a Republican looking for a job now, or 2 years later, the tides have turned in the opposite direction, you're back in the job hunt again. And with me tonight are three very well qualified people, so qualified that not only are extremely successful in the political world, the policy world, and politics, but they've all written books about it as well, that hopefully you'll go by. But instead of me introducing these guys, I'm gonna turn it over to them. But first, one quick plug. I've worked with each of these individuals in different parts of my political career, and I didn't choose them just because they wrote books. I chose them to be on this panel because they really are insightful and they enjoy helping other people find their jobs and have a lot of great wisdom to share with you tonight. So I will let Stephanie kick it off.
Thank you, Tom. And just thank you for your service to the DC community and young people who are trying to find their way in this crazy town. Tom and I first met, I think probably in 2006, when I first started on the House side of Capitol Hill. I was a baby press secretary. I think I was 23 years old. I was probably one of the youngest press secretaries on the Hill, and he worked for then Speaker Pelosi. And was a really great time for me because I was, had just come to DC in 2004. I'd done the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute Fellowship. In 2005, went to the House side and worked for Linda Sanchez as her press secretary, and then worked for the House Democratic Caucus, where I also met Jamie. See, it's a small town. This is why one of my big points I will drive home is be careful who you date. Maybe Jamie and I dated at one point many years ago. But also because you just don't know who you're going to kind of come into contact with over your time. I've had interns be my bosses. I've been an intern and a boss to other people. So over the course of time, worked on the House side for a little bit, went back to the Senate. I was a press secretary for Ken Salazar, the senator from Colorado. And then went to work on the Obama campaign, took a chance on a guy named Barack Obama, left my job in the Senate. That obviously panned out into about eight years worth of my life, my 20s, most of my 20s and my early 30s, working at the White House in the Office of Public Engagement, and then at the Department of Commerce for Secretary Penny Pritzker. I then went to go work at Google in their DC Public Policy Office, where I also got to work with Tom again when he was at Spotify, which is his full-time job. So got to really see the intersection of tech and politics and policy, which is obviously a big deal right now. And then I left Google about a year ago and now work for a guy named Reid Hoffman, who's the founder of LinkedIn and PayPal. And he's been doing a lot of political giving over the course of the last couple of years, which has been largely publicly reported, so I can talk about it. But it basically I've been helping him try to figure out where he should spend and invest resources in helping to develop kind of political capacity. So have kind of translated and navigated both on the Hill, him coming to DC DC as with almost zero experience in 2004. Kind of was in the minority for a couple years. Then 2006, Democrats went back to the House, so got to learn those muscles of being in the majority, and then both kind of the translating between House and Senate, private sector, public sector.
And before Amos goes, I just want to say we're going to just tell our panelists here, we have a lot of folks live streaming right now, so
Awesome.
I know the rain and the discouragement of people turning out, but 3 special live streamers, Andrew, Alexis, and Georgie. Hi, I'll see you guys later. Amos? Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. Hey, I'm Amos Sneed. I'd like to thank Tom for having us and for you marrying really well, because I am the Republican up here. Jamie and I wrote a book about working on Capitol Hill, but I'll give you my quick, hill climb. So I grew up in Alabama. I moved to Washington, D.C. I had an internship, and I got a job at a PR firm, but I wanted to work on Capitol Hill. That's all I ever wanted to do. It's why I moved to Washington. And as I kept talking to people, I kept hearing the same phrase, well, you can't really work on Capitol Hill until you have Hill experience. And I thought, well, how can you get Hill experience if nobody's going to give me a job, right? I'm sure you're running into some of this as well. So I just wanted to work on Capitol Hill, and I found out there was a going-away party for someone who was leading a committee. I went to the going-away party. I didn't know anybody, and I walked in and said, hey, who here hires staff assistants? And they're like, well, it's that lady right there. I'm like, got it. And so I waited, and then when she was in line to go to the bar, I was like, I'll grab whatever you need and bring it to you. Don't worry about it. And she's like, okay. And so I did, brought her the drinks, and she was like, who are you? And I was like, I'm Amos, and I want to be a staff assistant. And she kind of looked at me funny, and she said, I tell you what, call me at 8 a.m. tomorrow, because I'm sure she's thinking this guy hangs out in bars and probably says this until he lands the job. So I called her at 8 a.m. the next day, and a few weeks later, they had an opening on the committee, and I got my first job on Capitol Hill. I was a staff assistant. I answered phones. I sat the water out on the dais before the committee hearings start, and I made sure the microphone stands were down so that the cameras could take pictures of all the members up on the dais during the committee hearing. Now, if you ask my grandmother at the time, I was advising the president, which is what she told everybody back home in Alabama. But my journey from there, somebody I was sitting next to got an opportunity to be a chief of staff for a freshman member of Congress. And he wanted to bring up his campaign staff, but he wanted a D.C. chief of staff and a D.C. press person. And so literally one day she looked at me and she said, you're going to come with me and you're going to be the press secretary. That's how I got my job being a press secretary. And then I got an opportunity. There were some leadership elections in the House on the Republican side. And Mr. Blunt from Missouri, he's now a U.S. Senator. At the time, he was the Republican whip in the House. And I got an opportunity to work in his office. And it was right when, I'm going to date myself, it was right when the internet had started, and we didn't know what to do with blogs, or do we care about Red State? Who cares what the corner at National Review says? Do we really have to treat them like journalists? Are they journalists? Are they on our side? We don't know. And it was one of those opportunities, and I think you'll get this throughout your career, if you're ever on a team with thoroughbreds all around you, right? Like everybody has their lane, and something opens up and nobody has that lane. So I was given that opportunity to go figure out this blog thing. So I dove in. And then similar to Tom, when I left Capitol Hill, I started a company called Famous DC. If you don't follow it, it's at Famous DC on Twitter and Instagram. It's a media company that covers the intersection of politics and digital and media, but all in a Washington focus. And then we convene events like this as well. So that was kind of my story of how I climbed Capitol Hill. And when I was working in House Republican leadership in the whip's office, there was a gentleman who worked for the Democratic whip who ran the floor for him, for Mr. Clyburn. His name was Jamie Harrison. Matt, I will pause there. That's where our friendship started, and turn it over to Mr. Harrison.
Thank you, Amos. It's so good being on this panel with these guys. I think I've known Tom the longest, for almost 15 years, I believe.
Yep.
And Stephanie, the three of us working in House Democratic leadership. Stephanie was working in the vice chair's office. I was, my boss, Mr. Clyburn, was the caucus chairman and then became the majority whip. And Tom was working for the leader, then the speaker. And it was an amazing ride. There's nothing like the transition of going from the minority to the majority. Because it's a start. In the Senate, majority, minority doesn't really matter. But in the House, it really does matter. And Amos was on the downside of that transition.
I'm not good.
But I got a chance to meet him, and we are friends, and he's like my brother. it was a joy to write the book with him, and it's just a joy to have our kids grow up and for us to still be together and working together to help groom the next generation of talent in this country, not only here in DC but in the country. So a little in terms of my hill climb, which is my love of politics when I think about it. So I'm currently the associate chair of DNC. I ran for DNC chair back after the 2016 election. Didn't win, but helped Tom Perez win the chairmanship, and so he asked me to stay on as an associate chair. But before all of that happened, I was this roundhead boy in Orangeburg, South Carolina, who would watch news every morning with his grandfather. And I love politics. I love history. I love politics. Nobody in my family ever was involved in politics, but I somehow just developed this love. And so it really all started when I was a junior in high school. I worked on the Clinton Gore campaign, volunteered, but I also met Congressman Jim Clyburn. He had just been elected to the Congress, the first African American since Reconstruction in South Carolina. And so I had just gotten elected as president of the National Honor Society, which is a big deal, right? And I asked him to, again, when you're young and you just don't know any better, I called the congressman's office and they asked if he would install me as president of the National Honor Society. And he did it. He came to my high school and he did the installation. And at that moment, right afterwards, I said, well, Congressman, I want to work in your office. And that thought stayed in my head. He said, well, I want you to go to college first. And while you're in college, maybe you can become an intern and then we'll see you after that. Well, I never forgot that. So fast forward, I went on to college. I interned in the Senate. I interned on the House side for Congressman Clyburn through the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation internship. And I stayed in touch and in contact with the office. I then decided to go and do something else. I didn't go directly to the Hill, so I worked at a nonprofit called College Summit for a little while. I started at Georgetown, and in the midst of my second year at Georgetown, I get this call from the Congressman's Chief of Staff, Yevie Watkins, who is still the Congressman's Chief of Staff. And he said, Jamie, the Congressman and I have been watching you and been keeping up with you. And the Congressman was just elected Vice Chair of the House Democrats. And he wants somebody to work on his leadership staff. And he wants you to come and do it. And I was just like blown away. But the problem was I was in law school at the time. I was in my second year. So he said, well, Yevie, how do I do that? He said, well, we know you're in law school. We'll work it out. So I started in his office literally 3 weeks afterwards. My first thing was the House Democratic Caucus Issues Conference in Nemacolin, I believe. Getting on this bus with all of these icons in Democratic politics, from Rita Pelosi to John Lewis, to Barney Frank, and all these people. So my mind is absolutely, as a political wonk, I'm just like blown. Oh my God, I'm doing all this. Charles Rangel, all of these folks. And the congressman gives me 5 appropriations bills. Mind you, I had never done any of this stuff in my life. Labor, health, education, defense, military construction, VA, homeland security, and interior. And I'm thinking, and this is during the days of the earmarks, like, what the heck am I going to do? And so they said, well, you're smart, you'll figure it out. And in the end, I figured it out. I can bake red velvet cakes. I sent them to the committee. My boss got a lot of good earmarks that he didn't think he would get, and the rest is history. So as he rose up the ranks of leadership, he took me along with him. So he became vice chair, then he went to caucus chair, and he named me the executive director. I think at the time I was the youngest and the first African American. Then he became majority whip, and I ran the whip operation for him, which was probably the best job of my life. And we'll go down in that. So if you ever get an opportunity to work in the whip's office, you better take it, because it is an amazing experience. And I did that for a few years, and then I decided to go to private sector. I lobbied for about 8 years, and then went back home to South Carolina and ran for chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party. And so the rest is history.
So a lot of what we're going to tell you tonight is about how to find a job on Capitol Hill, in the administration, on presidential campaigns, congressional campaigns. or in the private sector here in DC, but just so we can get a feel for those in the room, and I'm not sure those on live stream, but raise your hand if you're trying to get a job on Capitol Hill. All right. Raise your hand if you're trying to get a job in the administration. Which administration? Raise your hand if you're trying to get a job on a...
1 second.
Someone in the administration didn't like that. Raise your hand if you're trying to get a job on a presidential campaign, congressional campaign,
Or any other kind of campaign job.
Testing,
campaign
testing.
job. What about private sector PR lobbying? Okay. All
Let's
right,
do
so-
it before and after, because let's see how compelling our advice is at the end. Who wants to?
Right. So since the majority of the room is trying to get a job on Capitol Hill, what 3 pieces of advice, and try to keep it short because we want to get to a lot of questions, especially from the audience, would you give folks about getting a job on Capitol Hill?
Well, I would say I'll start, and I'll be super precise because mine are very applicable not just to the Hill, but to really any job. Because I think, I think in politics generally and in DC in this world, a lot of this advice applies. One is, and I don't just say this because I work for one of the founders of LinkedIn, but go update your LinkedIn profile. Your LinkedIn profile should be exactly like the resume that you hand out in an office. I'm going to give a super specific example. There's a new governor who is looking for a very high senior role in their office. They reached out to me because they wanted some help from my network around finding some qualified candidates. The one guy who I think would be really great at this job doesn't even have a LinkedIn profile. And now I'm going to have to send him 3 emails to get his resume and do whatever. I worked on the Clinton transition team that never, happened, but I worked on the pre-transition where we were building lots of resumes and kind of slates for what would eventually be the transition in the Clinton administration had that happened. We were not allowed to talk to anybody. I exclusively used LinkedIn to stalk people's experience and to find candidates. And so I found lots of really great candidates that way, people that I knew outside of my network, or I didn't know inside of my network, but that LinkedIn led me to. But it was also a really great way because there's a privacy setting that I can do so people don't know I'm looking at their LinkedIn profiles. And I could grab people's LinkedIn profiles who I thought were good candidates and build slates that way. So that if your LinkedIn profile is not updated, that's the one piece of homework you have to go home and do tonight and make sure it reflects your resume. The second piece is, which I think Jamie kind of alluded to, with Hill jobs and other political jobs, is in a large part, you come equipped with great educational experiences, great life experience, but at a certain point, it's a little bit fake it till you make it. And I hate to say it, but it really is, because none of us, especially for your first Capitol Hill job, how many of you guys who are looking for Hill jobs never worked on the Hill before? So a fair amount. Which is to say, it's, don't lie, don't be fake, but you kind of have to sink or swim, right? And that's my third piece of advice, which is with any job, whether, especially in politics, on political campaigns or on the Hill, I've literally interviewed hundreds of people in my time at the White House, on the transition team and other places. I have interviewed people who have been to Harvard, who are Rhodes Scholars, who are really exceptional candidates on paper. The number one thing that I look for is hunger. I look for people who are ready to do the job, who are ready to do whatever it takes to do that job, whether it is making copies and getting coffee for the cabinet secretary because the room is falling apart and that's the one thing that's going to keep her from falling apart, or doing the legwork and the research that's really thoughtful and well thought out. And so as you go into these interviews, hunger can often be the thing that sets you apart from other candidates, and that eagerness and desire. There's a balance between, eagerness and desperation. You don't want to come off as being desperate, but you definitely can come off being hungry and a hard worker.
Okay, I'll stick with the 3, Tom. Number 1, go buy a stack of thank you cards. I know you're going to say, no, I emailed, I followed up, I followed them on Twitter, they know I'm there, I like their post on LinkedIn. Buy a stack of thank you cards. The people that are going to hire you are getting 300, 400, 500 emails a day, right? They're getting requests all day, they're in meetings. They may get 1 or 2 thank you cards a month. And when they get it, they leave it on their desk because they want other people to see that they're helping people out. So that's going to separate you. Number 2, go in person. Whenever you can, go meet someone in person. I've been in DC almost 20 years. I don't know anybody, not one, that's gotten a job because they submitted the resume online, and that was it. I mean, it might happen. I'm sure it's existed. I'm sure it's out there. if you can, go in person, because the person, they want to look at you, and they want to know that you can do this job. Your resume may be spectacular. How do you present? How are you in person? And then my third, follow up. Send the thank you after the meeting, send the thank you card. True story, I was on Capitol Hill. I was the press secretary in this freshman office, and we needed to hire a staff assistant. And so the legislative director was doing all the interviewing, and all these candidates came in. I mean, it was a staff assistant job, and you get like 30, 40 resumes, right? So they had gotten it down to 2 people that came in, and both met with the chief of staff, and then I met with them as the press secretary. I think they just needed people to meet with. And so the LD and I sat next to one another, and he looked at me, he's like, which one did you like? And I was like, well, I mean, I kind of like that guy. And he was like, all right, cool. And I was like, which one are you going to hire? And he said, I'm going to hire the first one that sends a thank you card. Now on the Hill, it's a little different because you can't mail the stuff because people are mailing bombs and crazy stuff in the mail. So it takes 2 or 3 weeks to get to the actual office. So it had to be hand delivered. And I remember the day that Andrew Blaylock, who still works in government now, walked in and gave his thank you card for the chief of staff and the LD. And I thought, man, he doesn't know it, but that cat just got a job right there. That's it. Thank you cards, go in person when you can, and make sure you follow up. I yield my time to Mr. Harris.
Thank you.
Jamie, sorry, one thing.
Yes.
For those of you sitting in the back, there are tons of chairs up front. Feel free to walk in front of us and grab a seat. Go ahead, James.
I think Stephanie's, and we're piggybacking, we're going back and forth. The hunger is very, very important. Do the job and do the very best damn job that you can do. So when I told you all I was an intern in Senator Hollins, or in the Senate. It was the summer after my freshman year in college. And as an intern, they came to us one day and said, guess what, guys? We got a shipment of watermelons coming in from South Carolina, and we need you all to go deliver watermelons. Now, I'm a black guy from South Carolina. And I'm like, deliver watermelons? What? Right? I'm in my nice suit, I don't. But you know what? In the end of the day, we went and delivered those damn watermelons. And I did the very best job that I could do it, and I did it with a smile, and so much so that other folks in the hallways would come into the Senate office. Oh, I saw that nice intern of yours. He was delivering watermelons, and he was doing a great job. You guys have any extra watermelons? But nonetheless, fast forward a few years, I go back into that office, and I get offered a job. The first job I got offered was not the one from Congressman Clapper, but it was the one from Senator Hollins' office. They were looking for an LA for education issues. I was working at a nonprofit at the time. And I went up to Joey and I said, Joey, what, I haven't worked with you guys in years. Why do you? He said, Jamie, because when you were an intern, you were one of the first people there in the morning, you were one of the last people at night. You went to us always asking, how can I be helpful? Mm-hmm. What can I do in order to make things easier for you all? And we all remember that. And that's the type of person that we wanted to bring into this culture of our office. So you were one of the first people that came to mind. And we say all that to say, and there's another thing, is that people are always watching you, even when you don't realize that they're always watching how you behave, how you even approach an office and come into an office to give your resume. People are watching that and taking note of that, and they're making a judgment based off of that. And that the doors of opportunity, there's so many little nuanced things that happen on Capitol Hill that you want to make sure that everything that you have control over, that you are putting the best foot forward. From the things, your conversations with other folks in the cafeteria, to what your resume looks like, to your references, all of those things are extremely, extremely important, because it can be the smallest thing that eliminates you from when you have 500 resumes that you're looking at. The smallest thing. So make sure you're paying attention to detail on your resume, all the periods. Then get another set, 2 or 3 sets of eyes on your resumes. If you have writing statements, make sure that they're top-notch writing statements. No mistakes, no grammar errors. All of those things are extremely, extremely important, because what offices are looking for are ways to eliminate people, to winnow down the number of great applicants that they have. So don't give them the opportunity to throw you in that foul. And you guys hit on a lot of the other things, and so I'll just leave it at that.
I'll follow up on attention to detail is so critical. When I was working with the Gore campaign, I went as a volunteer. I was hooking up computers back in 2000 because I was the young guy who knew to hook up computers. And I did that the best as I could do. When I had to run an errand, I did that in the quickest time and made sure I did it right and the product I gave them was correct. So attention to detail and speed and the willingness to do what it takes to get the job done. Come in early, stay late, and that's just valued.
Yeah.
And then after I worked for the Gore campaign and got sent to headquarters because of my attention to detail and hard work, then I went to intern for Nancy Pelosi. And they made me stock the fridge. I stocked that damn fridge better than anyone else. And members ate in the whip's office, they eat all stuff and get all the rug dirty. I vacuumed that rug better than any other intern.
Yes.
And so guess what? I stocked the fridge and vacuumed better than anyone else. They offered me a staff assistant job. And then I was witness history at the feet of Miss Pelosi for 9 years because I paid attention to detail, even on the most minimal tasks.
That's exactly right. Her Ghirardelli chocolate, you always kept that bowl
Hey,
full.
it was full, nice and full.
Well, one other thing I want to add.
yeah.
Tom, also, understand how the Hill operates. That is so, so important. Don't go into and say, I want an LA job, and you have no damn clue what an LA does, right? Understand all of the positions and how they work together. And if you don't know because you don't have the experience, talk with some other folks who do. Use those opportunities, those coffees, to understand the nuanced points. And why is that important? Because when you're on a member's staff, they need you to be their eyes and ears. They need you to think about things even before it comes into their minds and to have an answer or know where you can go in order to find the answer. So don't just understand what happens in a personal office. Understand what happens on the committee and what the members' responsibilities are in the committee and how leadership interacts with them and why they need to go over to the DCCC or the NRCC in order to do call time. All of that stuff is very, very important that you are an informed person. You need to be sort of a Renaissance man or a Renaissance woman going into Capitol Hill, because if you are, then you're useful to that particular member. And if you're useful to them, you will rise very, very quickly up the hill.
Can I ask you all three a question? I think, and what I'm going to do is after this, I'm going to send a follow-up email with some helpful links to their books, an article that I wrote on 11 key networking tips and what I consider them to be key. But let me ask you guys. So these folks are trying to find a job on the Hill, whether they're a House Republican staffer who just lost a job because their boss lost, or they're a Democrat trying to get a job with a new member. What networking techniques can they get to, and Amos, you said show up in person, but maybe we can expound on that a little bit more. What does that mean? Do they go to happy hours? Do they go to the California State Society? Do they go to the Congressional Black Caucus Institute event? What things can they do to get in front of the people that are going to be hiring them now or in 6 months or in 12 months?
So there's an old adage in Washington, D.C. that's, something about how the people who are like the smartest people in Washington are people who never pay for their dinners. So, go to every reception you can that's serving like free food and drinks, because that's likely the place where you're going to run into people that you may know on the Hill, right? There are going to be a lot of networking events, a lot of things that will be really important for you to go to in the coming weeks. I'm going to give you 3 very specific pieces of advice. The first one is, as you guys are kind of starting to think about what you do next, map your networks. And I kind of have like 3 ways to do this. And this is where, again, plug for LinkedIn, really helpful, because you can kind of see who your network is. And you know how on LinkedIn there have like 1st degree, 2nd degree, 3rd degree connections? It's great to have that like mapped out on LinkedIn, but it's also really important for you to do that. So I think there are kind of 3 core universes of your network. One is what I call your life board of directors, the people who are going to be kind of the counselors in your life who you go to for advice. I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if I want to do this. It's like your mom and your dad, like your college mentors, your whatever, right? The people who are going to counsel you through this transition. The next people are the people who are going to help you or who can help you in finding that job, that perfect job that you want to apply for a set of jobs, right? These are the people that you may know or that you do know that are either going to connect you to that job directly or help connect you to people who are going to connect you to that job directly. So you kind of have to look at, if I want to go work for Congressperson X, I know somebody who used to work in that office. I'm going to go to them and going to ask them to help me think about what is my pitch for that office. Or if I don't know somebody who's directly related to that office, I'm going to find somebody who knows somebody. Again, this is where LinkedIn's helpful. And then the 3rd tier out are the people who you don't know yet, but who that people in that 1st or 2nd ring are going to connect you to in order to make those connections to find that job. I know that sounded a little complicated, but just think about it as concentric circles of how you actually map your network. And you kind of want to do that for each job potentially that you are trying to apply for, that you feel really passionately about, that you really want, because only through that, and so much of this is applying and kind of putting your best foot forward, but sometimes it's just having a door opened for you and you walking through that door and being the best candidate. So find those people who are going to help you open that door.
It is tough sitting between you and Jamie because I'm literally marking off all this awesome stuff. I was
So
gonna
you get to
say
answer the first
as you
question.
say it.
You get to answer the question
I would
first.
say, first thing, get outside of your circle, that immediate circle. It's building on what you said. So who's in that immediate circle? It's your family, it's your parents, and it's your friends, right? If they could help you get a job, they would have already done it, right? If your parents could help you do that, they would. If your friends could help you, they would. You may be competing with some of your friends for those jobs. Get outside of that circle. And what I mean by that, look up. Jamie and I are buddies, and we're going to go spend the afternoon tailgating for the Nationals baseball game. It was fun. I enjoyed it. Jamie's in my immediate circle, right? I need to go do something that introduces me to someone outside that circle, such as an event like this tonight. Take a look. So on Famous DC, we send an email out on Fridays. We have a list of events that we put in there. It's a section of, yes, some of it's concerts and fun stuff like that, but there's also networking events. There's a group called Grassroots Professional Network, GPN. There's a lot of groups out there that exist, but you have to push yourself. Like, it's comfortable to sit back and say, well, I had a good day, and I hung out with Jamie, we saw the Nats play, and Bryce Harper hit a home run. Like, that's fine, but if you're you have to get outside that first circle.
So I want to dig into a little bit what they were saying. So give you a little of the psyche of being in the whip's office, right? And how you can apply this to your job search. So when you're in the whip's office, the goal is to get members of Congress to vote the way that you want them to vote, right? And the question is, how do you persuade them to do that? So one of your tasks is, how do you persuade this congressional office or this member or this chief of staff in order to hire you? So one of the things that I always thought about is the various hats that members have to wear. They have their policy law hat, right? What are the policies that are really important to them? And what are the groups that work with them on those particular policies? Then they have their political hat. Who are the people who are instrumental in helping them get elected or reelected or help them to achieve their political goals? And then there is sort of the personal hat, right? The family or the community organizations that really have a personal meaning to them. Many ways, when I would exhaust the hats that are the ones that you think are obvious, the policy and the political hats, I would go to the last hat, which is that sort of more personal hat, the family hat. Sometimes I would get members of Congress to vote the way that we needed to get them to vote, not because of making a policy argument or a political argument, but making the family argument. Finding out who their wives or husbands are and where they are affiliated, or the groups that if their kids are in some organization, and using that as the end in order to pitch. So when you're doing what Stephanie says, and you're on LinkedIn and you're looking at all these concentric circles, also see if member of Congress X, if you're particularly interested in a topic or an issue or an area, where their family orbits may have some connections, because it's amazing what spouses can get their members to do on a lot of things. And if a husband or a wife is passing along a resume that they have gotten, odds are that chief of staff is not going to question that. So you've got to be creative in this process and figure out what is your competitive advantage? How can you get an edge over the other 499 people who are also applying for this one position?
Can I just add one quick thing here? So I'm going to, it was right after, I think, the 2016 election. I can't remember when I wrote this blog post about kind of the networking, kind of similar with 11 tips for networking. I think I had 4. I'll have to go back and remember what they are. But, and if you follow me on Twitter, Stephanie Valence, VALENC, I will retweet it tonight to folks. Because I think you're going to be asking for a lot of coffees, right? And I get asked for a lot of coffee. To meet with people, can I have career advice, can we catch up? And so, and I need to start reminding people, because I think folks have kind of gone out of practice. When I do a coffee, I give folks 30 minutes. And I basically say, and I send them ahead of time when they ask me for these coffees, I say, this is what I need you to be prepared with. Bring your resume, because I will red mark it when we're sitting there. Don't email it to me after and expect me to like go back and forth with you 10 times. I'm gonna look at it and I'm gonna give you very concrete advice when I'm sitting with you. Come with your ask. Like, what do you want from me? Do you want me to just give you feedback? Do you want me to listen? I'm not gonna, sit here and do a 30-minute counseling session. Like, come with me with what your ask is and what your pitch is, and I'm gonna help you refine that, and I'm gonna help you, realize what that ask is that you have for me. And then the third piece is, again, kind of coming back to the pitch and your elevator pitch, know your pitch. And the last piece is be prepared to follow up. I think consistent with what everybody has said before, like the best mentees that I have and the best people who I meet with, who I give advice to, are people who, on their own, follow up with me and say, hey, update, I got this job interview, I'm interviewing at these 5 places, do you know anybody there? And I can say, yes, I do, no, I don't. My mic stopped working. And so it's incumbent upon you as the mentee or the person who's asking for advice to stay in touch with the person that you ask for advice from. And I think that, you can do that really easily in a non-inobtrusive way to the people that you're asking for help from. And sometimes, and what I tell people, I said, oftentimes I won't write back. If I have something to say, I'll write back. I read every single email that I get. And so if you send me something and I can help you with it, I will. But if I can't, I won't, or I'll just say that I can't. So it's incumbent on you to do that follow-up.
One thing on follow-up, I'll follow up on that follow-up, is that every time you have one of these coffees, informational interviews, send a thank you with your resume attached. I can't tell you how many people have gotten jobs when someone's sitting at a desk and it's, say, you're the communications director in the office and the chief of staff says, hey, I don't want to post this on Tom Manatos Jobs or any other board. I don't want to get 500 resumes. Do you know anyone good that's looking for an LC position? Oh, yeah, I just met with this young woman. Just fired your resume there because it was attached to the thank you email. I totally agree with Amos. You're also sending a thank you, handwritten thank you note, because no one does that anymore, and you'll stand out greatly. A second thing is, to Jamie's point on the common connections, I am so much more likely to help somebody that I have a common connection with, just like all of you are. Everyone is from somewhere else. Even though someone that's from here, like me, I have a common connection with someone else who's a local. That I'm going to go to bat for them a little bit more because we share that common connection. I don't care it's where you're from, what high school you went to, what college you went to, what fraternity or sorority you're part of, what ethnicity you're a part of, what religion you're a part of. When I was looking for a job, I went to find every Greek American, every person in the Greek Orthodox faith, every person that went to my undergrad or my grad school, and it didn't matter that they went to the same grad school. Even if they went to the undergrad, we were both of the same community. So whether you're Hispanic or you're African American or you're Greek or whatever, you use that common connection as an excuse to get introduced to that person or to develop a relationship with that person, and they're a little bit more likely to help you. The good thing about this town is everyone has been in your shoes. All 4 of us have been in your shoes, as we've described, and it's a very pay-it-forward community. So the fact that you have a cold email or cold call or cold coffee with somebody with no connection, it's okay. But that common connection just makes them a little bit more likely. So the challenge for you guys is, if you're going to work on the Hill, or you want to work on a presidential campaign, or you want to work in administration, find people with that common connection that you establish that coffee with. At the end of that coffee, not only are you sending them a thank you note with your resume attached, but before that coffee's done, you're going to ask them, is there someone else you'd suggest I touch base with? So when you start your ethnicity strand or your college strand, during that conversation on that college strand, you're going to say, oh, well, you're interested in environmental policy. I'll connect you with this person. And then that person sends you to someone back to your undergrad or whatever. And you have this huge web of people that you've networked with who all have your resume in their inbox, who all know you. If you then go on LinkedIn and you're applying for a job and say, oh, that person knows this person that I'm applying to. Hey, I don't know if you remember me. We had coffee a couple months ago. I saw that you're connected to this person, this chief of staff in this office that I just applied for. Would you mind sending my resume? That chief of staff, say it's Amos, who knows Jamie from a previous job, is going to rely on Jamie's advice, just even on a screening coffee, that Jamie had coffee with that young woman, and Jamie's his read of that person was that they're a good candidate, and he recommends them to Amos. Amos is so much more likely to hire that person based off of his friend's recommendation. So this networking can not only lead you to a job, but lead you to a recommendation also, and network your way to that job. Let me ask anyone who has a question, if you wouldn't mind just coming up to that microphone so we can hear your question. Don't be shy, get up there. I'm going to ask one more question of the panelists before we open it up to the audience.
You get to answer first.
Tom, can I also
Yes, go ahead, James.
One other thing I want you also to think about, don't just relegate yourself. I know that, that shiny dome it's like a magnet, and you just want to go there and you want to work there. Listen, I still, even though I've been off the hill for a while now, I still, every time I get there, I still get goosebumps. But there are also other ways that you can make a difference. Because ultimately what this is all about is about you making a difference. And I know many of you, that's why you want to get involved in this. Washington, D.C. is not the only place where you can make a difference. There are 50 state legislatures, 50 governors. A lot of new governors were just elected. They're going to open, many of them will open a D.C. office. And so many people probably aren't even thinking about that. So you could work for your governor in Washington, D.C. Because they have a Washington, D.C. presence. Some of them hire a small group, but some of them actually put staff here in the Capitol. So just think about, be creative about the ways that you think about and the opportunities that are out there. It's not just DC focused, but it's also state and local as well. The places where you could really plant a flag and do something.
And two things I would just add to that is one, as you know, Congress is pretty gridlocked and will be, continue to be gridlocked, I'm sure. So very little will actually move, it'd be a great experience. So, but a lot of places where things actually going to move is the state legislative level. And so that's a great opportunity to get some, local experience working in a state legislative chamber or governor's, office at the state level or an advocacy organization. I think, going back home and working at the state level is really important. I also think it's about to be a really crowded Democratic primary. And one of the silver linings of that, there are a lot of downsides, but one of the silver linings of that is that there will be an opportunity where people are going to need to hire utility players. I think mine is like dying here. Hiring a lot of utility players that are going to, that are just going to need people who can do, a lot of different tasks, who can be a jack or a jactress of all trades. And so I think it's one of the great things that's going to come of this is it's going to be a great incubator for Democratic talent and people who, I think campaigns are like dog years, both in experience and actual time. If you go work 6 months on a primary, for a primary presidential candidate, the kind of experience that you amass before you then get swallowed up by, the Democratic nominee or the top 2 or 3 Democratic, candidates is one that you cannot spend enough time trying to earn that experience in the normal world. And so I think whether it's a congressional candidate, because that's going to start up again soon too, or a presidential candidate, those are really important experiences to have.
District offices also.
Yeah, come on, guys, don't be shy. Come up here to ask some questions. Your questions are going to be the best ones. All right. This wasn't a shy group. Let me ask.
Thank you,
let me. You go ahead, buddy.
Thank you. Yes. No. Thank you for all coming. It's a very interesting talk. I did a variety of internships to figure out which role I wanted to focus on. Then went to graduate school. Is there a point at which it's not advisable to take a unpaid position or a fellowship, or is it good to continue pursuing that if it's a office or a workplace that would be that you're very interested in? Thank you.
Oh, listen, I think whenever a door of opportunity opens up, I'm one to believe you walk through it. If you are trying to get some more experience and you're trying to network, nothing beats being there in the midst of it. Because a lot of things happen on the hill. Sometimes people decide to leave, a staffer decides to leave just abruptly, and lo and behold, look, they need a new LA. Who are they going to choose? Some new person that they have to look at and call the references, or the person that's been there volunteering for the past 2 months? When I look at Mr. Clyburn's staff, most of the staffers that he has now had interned in that office at least one time before. And you find that in a lot of different offices because they get to know you, you build loyalty. Loyalty is so important on Capitol Hill. People and the members want to make sure that they can trust you, and the way that you do that is taking advantage of opportunities like fellowships, internships, to build those relationships with the staff, to get on the radar for that member of Congress, and also to get the skills that you need in order to do a job on a full-time basis.
One thing I'll say on that, thanks to the people, the great work at Pay Our Interns.
Yes.
There's, through the appropriations process, there's now going to be, finally, interns will be paid on Capitol Hill.
Yep.
Which will open the doors to many, many more people.
One of my mentees.
Thanks for your question. Next.
Hi. I'm just wondering what type of writing samples you guys want to see when you're sending in those. Like, is it like a one-page memo or like a longer legislative analysis or?
I think it depends on the job you're applying for. So if you're a press secretary, I want to see a press release or like a blog post, right? Or, and not even just writing samples, but I think this also gets to a little bit on the resume point as well, which is to say, like, I think being really specific on your resume is super important. You know, if you achieved like a really great, if you're a press person or a communications person, which I was, you know, and you achieved really great reach with the social media program or digital program that you did, I want to know the metrics. Like, what were the impressions you got? Like, what were the, like, don't just say I ran a program that did X or Y. Say I ran in a program that did X, Y, reached this many people. If you're a policy person, I, you know, helped to, even as an intern, I helped to write, you know, I did the research for the congressperson's, you know, main piece of legislation that became the #1 piece of legislation that they passed. Like, find those little nuggets that will make your resume more specific. To me, writing samples are important, but I also want to know that people have actually done really specific things.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Two questions from Twitter. One is, if you're not in DC, how do you get a job on the Hill? Any tips there?
Yeah. It goes back to being in person. Right now, some of these offices, they'll say, we need some resumes. I have seen this happen. Every resume that doesn't have like a DC or Maryland or Virginia address, they throw it out. It's just gone. Because then they start thinking, well, crap, they're moving from Texas. They got to get out of their lease. They got to get out of their apartments. It's going to take them 3 months to get here. Then they got to move. They're looking for somebody local. So if you're planning to make the trip to DC, this goes back into what you said, to fake it till you make it. Find a friend, find somebody that's living on Capitol Hill or Glover Park or Roslyn or wherever, and say, hey, do you mind if I just list your address there? I mean, is somebody going to pinpoint down and say, tell me about your condo? They're not going to. But they're going to look at it and say, oh, she's in Alexandria. That makes sense. And it could be your friend's address.
Hi, thank you all for being here. So for those of us who don't have Hill experience, I think, Amos, you said you started at a PR firm, which is sort of similar to the position I'm in. What do you recommend for the best way to pitch yourself and the experience you do have to transition, to note that your skills are transferable to a Hill job?
And that's similar to another question on Twitter, is like mid-career, how do you get that job on the Hill? So if you guys could address that too.
You want me to go?
It doesn't matter.
I would think, now, I was frustrated when I came from a PR firm where I worked on accounts and talked to clients, and I went to Capitol Hill, and they're like, no, you just answer the phone. I'm like, okay, but I can do this, and I can do it. They're like, no, your job is to answer the phone, that's it. And Jamie has also mentioned, oh, Mike's out too? Man. Jamie also mentioned how many of the offices started out as interns. Like, there is a little bit of that Hill envy, like, well, they started out as in LA, they didn't start out as a staff assistant. I mean, you do hear some of that. I think what I would do in your situation, are you looking for a policy job? Are you looking for a communications job? Are you looking for a campaign job? Is it a scheduling job? Identify what that is, and then I would, as you're applying for these, explain that. I have a year of experience writing. I have a year of experience talking to reporters or working on big PR campaigns if you're applying for a communications type job.
I would add to that, you know, because I worked in a nonprofit, and the way that I got in the Hill is a little awkward because I established relationships. But one of the things that some of the work that many nonprofits and education organizations really have a great translation over to what the things that people are working on in the Hill. And so one of the things that I would do is, if you're trying to get into X member's office or a committee's office, figure out some issues that they have worked on that are very similar to the work that you have done in the past, and use that to build, as Tom mentioned, build that common connection between, between your experience and their efforts on Capitol Hill, and that's the best way to go about it. I know a lot of folks also, you probably have, well, I need to go and get another degree in order to be somebody on the Hill. Listen, if you feel like you need to be an issue expert and you want to know everything about Yemen and you need to go and get a PhD in Yemen, and that's fine if you want to do that. But you don't absolutely need that in order to be on the Hill and to work on a committee staff. Yeah, you need to have a solid understanding. It's good if you have spent some time doing some efforts in that space. But going to get another degree worth of $100,000 or $150,000 in loans, I just don't think it's worth it.
I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys for joining us. In terms of being there in person, my question is kind of two parts. For newly elected members, they obviously don't have offices yet, and I'm assuming they're probably not working out of their campaign offices anymore. That maybe the lease went an extra month or something. But how do you reach out to them and stand out and be in person? And then the other flip side of the question is, I have seen some job posts say no walk-ins, please. Is there a limitation to how much you? I mean, obviously there is, but where's that boundary between, being in person and being too present, I guess would be the word?
Great question. Well, so the one thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you guys remember, if I'm remembering incorrectly, but each new member has a cubicle in one of the House office buildings, and I think it's in Rayburn. It fluctuates, but they literally have a cube that sometimes they'll have somebody there, or they'll just have a box for resumes and you drop it. And I'm dating myself because it's been 6 years since I've been out of that game, so I'm sure there's more digital representation to it. But they do have office space as of last week. One. Two, that's where you use your network of who knows these people. So do you know the campaign manager? Do you know that someone worked on the campaign? Do you know their media consultants? Most people who run for office, they listen to maybe their state party chair, their campaign manager, and their media consultants. Who is buying TV ads for them in D.C.? Who is placing their their Twitter and Facebook ads? Go find that organization. So you network your way into it. Go to the delegation, whether it's a California member, if it's a Nebraska member, you go to the other members of that delegation to lob your resume in, because the chances are they know who their future chief of staff is or the campaign manager was. So you use other ways in there as well. What other
And
ways
I'd
you
say some people randomly will still be like on Facebook. So like there was a new member who was just elected who's still on Facebook, and I was Facebook messaging with him the other day. And so, I think like some of them will just still, or they're real people, and obviously they have people who check that stuff for them and manage it for them too, but at some level, like some of them are still checking it. So be creative in the outreach that you do do all those things Tom said, but find other unique ways too as well.
Can I just use one pet peeve of mine? If you're not like friends with them, don't Facebook friends them. Like LinkedIn them. Like there's a dividing line in my world. It's like, if I don't actually know you or maybe not have met you, don't Facebook friend me. I think that's like a careful professional world. But to Stephanie's point, they are real people. So, tweet at them, DM them on Twitter, message them on LinkedIn. Like that's all appropriate. And then go through those other avenues to that person. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think I'm friends with Tom on Facebook.
Yes.
I hope so.
Hi, thanks for being here. So I actually just finished an election hire position at a digital firm, and I used to work at the DSCC, so most of my resume has gaps in it between election time, and so what's the best way to explain that to an employer while I'm still doing other things when I'm unemployed?
Well, I think, gaps are fine as long as you can explain them. And I think that, in your case, I think people, especially in this world, know that, there are cycle gaps, right? Like, and those cycle gaps can be 2 weeks, they can be a month, they can be 6 months, right? And I think that as long as, there are, things that you can talk about and point to, like when you are doing those interviews, to say, I was, didn't have a job for 6 months, but I was doing a little consulting gig here, or doing this there, or, here's just how I, continued to, add tools to my toolbox in that time. That's totally fine and legit. And I think like everybody in this town understands that 150%. So I would not worry about that too much.
Hi. So I work in fundraising for nonprofits, and I'm looking to make a transition into the political world of fundraising. and I'm noticing and having some difficulty trying to connect with those that are in that sphere. They're rather, I wouldn't say sheltered, but they don't, it's hard to connect with them, and, you know, they kind of push you away, or they're like, you know, and you can't, I have difficulty locating them, you know, and trying to get their contact information. Any advice when you run into that scenario and that kind of...
One of the things I would suggest, particularly if you already have a job and you just want to try to build some relationship,
Yeah.
you know, all of the major committees, the DS, the DNC, all have large fundraising components. And so going to setting up coffee or times in order to meet them, volunteering a few hours a week to help at events that they're putting together in DC. And normally you can go to events, and you know, I think many of the fundraising events are posted. You can go to events and just network and meet some of the fundraisers and say, listen, hey, I'm in DC, I do nonprofit fundraising at this point, but I want to break into the political fundraising. Can I come and help out your firm for a few hours every week? Do that for a month or so, and then you build something that you can put on your resume. That now you can say you've actually had some opportunity to do some of this. And listen, I don't know if you're a Democrat, but there are going to be 30 Democrats running for president. So
I would also say,
they're all looking for
yeah,
fundraisers.
I mean, fundraising is one of those things that either you love it or you hate it. And if you like it, like, they should be running to try to have coffee with you, because there need
Yeah.
to be more fundraisers in town, so.
One thing also, like even if you're not a Democrat, I mean, you have the RNC, you have the president's reelection campaign, you have congressional campaigns, you have Senate campaigns that are all going to start fundraising. In fact, it is the day they started fundraising, the day after the election, because they need to fill up their coffers because of the debt they went into for the campaign.
Yeah.
So it is 365. It's always happening. So I think, but again, I think I love the advice Jamie gave you, but I think again you use your common connections of like, who do you know in your world, in your development world, nonprofit development world, might have made that jump? Who do people that you work with know? Because one of the best things is a recommendation because someone had worked with you. Sure, a coffee recommendation is great, but if someone that you might have worked with in your career at some point recommends you to someone for a coffee or a job, they're so much more likely to do that with you.
And take a look at your donors and see if there are donors that you work with that also are political donors, because many times, particularly if you're big dollar donors, they work with some people and develop relationships with some fundraisers, and so they can easily refer you and say, hey, I work with this guy at this nonprofit. I don't know if you're looking for somebody, but if you can connect them, and that helps, because if a donor calls me, then I'm going to listen to what they're talking about.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, guys, I think we have time for 3 more questions.
Hi, my name is Caroline Claff. Thank you for talking tonight. So I spent time on and off the Hill for a while and now work at a think tank. And I wanted to push back on what you said about putting someone else's address on your resume. The reason that I had a hard time getting hired full-time on the Hill was because I wasn't from the state that they were looking for. So I was an intern, staff assistant, but it could only temp because they wanted someone from the home state. So that was really it was interesting what you said.
You can add 2 addresses.
Home.
Yeah, even though I'd spent substantial time in the state, didn't really matter. They wanted someone from the home state. My question is about getting pigeonholed. So, for example, if you make your way up to LC and you're focusing on healthcare and economy, or for example, and you want to transition to foreign policy, what's the best way to do that? Do you switch offices? Do you go to grad school and take yourself out of the equation for a while? How do you sort of change tack?
So I would say they're kind of, the advice I give to people when people ask this question, I think you have kind of 2 things. No? Yeah, there we go. You have your skill set. So like you're a comms person, you're a policy person, you're like a lawyer, and then you have like the set of issues that you know. You're a healthcare person, you're a foreign policy person, whatever. So I think like the challenge is you can't change both of those things at the same time. Like you can't become, if you're really good at healthcare and you're a policy person, you can't become a press person and start like a whole new set of issues. So I think you can easily apply, like I was a press person and was able to translate that to outreach. Was able to shift gears from being like a person that talked to reporters to being a person who talked to organizations and groups and advocates, because I was able to translate that experience. So fundamentally, if you are a policy person and you know how the Hill works, you know how the committee process works and how to write a bill and how to write an amendment and like how you navigate the floor process, like as long as you have some stuff to point to say like I'm really passionate about X region of the world or Y thing, like I'm ready to take on that set of issues too. So sometimes starting with, a member or asking in the current office that you're in, hey, I'd really like to start taking on some of these foreign policy issues because eventually you're trying to make that transition. And then moving to a member that, maybe that's not their top issue, but it's one where you can kind of take on those issues, practice with them, and kind of build a rapport with them until you can get to like the next place where it's like that becomes your dominant issue and your primary issue and you kind of make that transition. So I think you've got to kind of, just find those ways to build up the experience and the expertise while still doing the thing that you're known for. And then to a point where you can say, make that pivot and make a credible pivot to say, I know enough about this issue that you can entrust this entire portfolio to me now.
We actually, I'm plugging our book now, which is Climbing the Hill. It's on Amazon. Write a review if you like it. We spent some time on the chapter of that in our book about people moving. That's okay. There's time. There's an audio version. There's an audio version. And then in the back, we kind of mapped out, what the different responsibilities are in each office. And we later found out that this was actually in Politico's newsroom for a while because the reporters never worked on this. They didn't know, like, if the LD's calling me back, is that as important as the press secretary, as the chief? So that was a very, very shameless plug. Thank you for that. Thank you, Carl.
Thanks, absolutely.
Hi, thank you guys so much for being here. You kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but I would love to hear more about working for a campaign committee like the DTRIP or the DNC, national organizations that are focused on a lot of different campaigns and also national campaigns.
So, in the campaign committees, it's sort of a microcosm of all the things that take place. I mean, at the DNC, there's fundraising, there's political and organizing. Fundraising, political and organizing. There are people who are social media experts, the communication staff. So all of the aspects of a campaign you find at these committees, but they're much larger than a campaign. It's like super campaigns. There are internships there. I know at the DNC we just started paid internships. I don't think all of the committees yet are doing that. But those are great ways and opportunities to get an opportunity to go in and see how these committees work. There's also, in addition to the major committees, there are state party committees, which are also, they're always looking for new staff and new talent. Again, it's everything under the rainbow that you can find on a campaign. And if you have campaign experience, then that's really what the major committees look for when they make their hires.
I'll touch on something Stephanie said earlier, is that campaigns are, you get more experience yourself at a younger age. You get paid less, but you get a lot more. I mean, at the age of 22 or 21, I was spending crazy amounts of money each week booking travel for Mrs. Gore's advanced staff around the world, around the country. Now, it wasn't glamorous, but I was spending a ton of money at the age of 21. I never would have that responsibility on Capitol or the private sector. So you do get a lot more responsibility on campaigns. I worked on President Obama's re-election campaign for the Republicans in the room that would want to for President Trump's re-election campaign. Even then, you get a lot more responsibility. I would just warn for those in the audience or watching that would want to work for President Trump, there isn't always a landing spot for you on a re-election campaign. That those of us that worked on President Obama's re-election campaign and then wanted to go in the administration, it's not like everyone said, "Oh, we just got re-elected. I'm going to leave now." Like they like their job. They're staying there. So that is one warning to those jumping on a re-election campaign. Is oftentimes there's not necessarily a space for you in that Senate office, in that House office, or in that administration. Whereas a new campaign, there are more opportunities. But can't say it enough. Everyone is in this town because either they were elected or the person they came with was elected. So I think campaign work is critical to understanding this city and why this city runs. because there's three things members of Congress care about: reelection, reelection, and reelection. And to be a part of that and understand that on the ground is vital to the reason this city operates. All right, well, I'm sorry, guys. One more question. Yeah, well, let's do. That's a great idea, Stephanie. If you all would each ask your question, and then we'll try to address them. So kind of rapid fire, if you don't mind.
So my question is just, so I work for a conservative congressman, Tea Party member, and because I'm from Texas, and that was what my network could get me, and I want to work for a Democratic House member. How can I make that transition? Because I support more policies and everything or more. So
Okay,
We
we'll
talk
come
about
back.
that too.
We'll come
Yeah,
back.
we'll do that. All right, sorry, next.
So I see a few gray hairs in the audience. I've been on the Hill and I've lobbied, and I left all that behind for a while and went out and was a lawyer for a while, and now I'm looking to get back in. And so it's kind of a different thing when you're coming back cold. You got friends, maybe they're not there anymore, maybe they don't recall seeing you every day.
Okay.
And so maybe just some advice for people trying to get back in the loop after being out for a while.
Great question. Two more.
So I currently intern in a senator's office, and I know I'm doing a good job because they asked me to come back next semester with cut hours but the same pay, so effective. But I'm not sure what you mean by like stay early and stay late, because I finish all my work by 2, and I'm just kind of sitting there, and a lot of times when I ask for more work, they like say you can go home early, or they don't really let me do more work. And I think a lot of the work is classified too, and I don't have a security clearance.
Great questions. These are awesome. Okay, last one.
Yeah, Tom, Stephanie, Amos, Jamie, thank you guys so much for doing this. This has been a really great experience. My name's Matt. My question is, when you look at resumes for folks you're hiring who've worked on campaigns, what specifically stands out for you in the press world, in the political world, and organizing? What sort of things do you look for in a resume or in a conversation from folks who've worked on campaigns that really stands out and is transferable? Thanks, guys.
I'll do the last. I'll do the resumes first.
I don't want to steal anything.
No, that's all right. Who wants to go conservative to Democrat? Jamie?
So the one thing that you all have to realize that things have changed. You know, when we all started, that transition probably was not as difficult. Now it's pretty hard. You can't work for Ted Cruz and then expect to work in Bernie Sanders' house. It just doesn't happen, and it's very, very difficult for that to do that. That does not mean it's impossible. It just means that it's difficult. So one of the things that you have to do, because loyalty and trust are fundamental aspects of working on Capitol Hill, and because people will see you work in one office and they think, well, I don't know what's going on here. What's the deepest story? And many times people don't want to take the time in order to find that out. And so it's really, really important then that you have to go and start building a reputation. You can't just do cold turkey, right? You're going to have to start volunteering on some Democratic campaigns and doing things to build up your Democratic side or a Republican side, whichever way you're switching, in order to demonstrate that. Now, if you explain to somebody, listen, the only congressman that I had in my home state, they're all Republicans or they're all Democrat, so therefore that's why I'm doing that. You can explain that away, but you've got to show that you've been working on the other side of the aisle, because the Hill will make you choose even if you don't want to.
So I'll take the middle 2 questions on coming back cold and kind of creating or like staying late and leaving early or whatever. So one, I would kind of applicable to answer the question. I think all of the stuff we talked about leveraging your networks, mapping your networks, reconnecting with people, and finding ways to do that is all applicable to wherever you are in your career. The thing that I would say for also applicable, but I think especially specific to what you mentioned, is find what makes you unique, right? You have been off the Hill for however many years, but it's not like you've not been doing anything. You've gotten a really great experience being a lawyer, working on a set of issues, whatever those have been and what they are. How does that translate to what's happening on the Hill, and how does that make you unique and different? And so the piece of advice I'd give to anybody who's in this role for any job you're applying is, how are you a unicorn? Like, how are you different to that? You know, some of that is, again, that thread that you have. You're from the state, you're from the district, you know, you work on the pet issue of that member, and you're expert on it. Like, what is it that makes you unique, and your unique pitches that make you stand out is really important. And I would say the last thing to that question is just on tools in your toolbox. Everybody should view every job they're getting or every kind of next step in their career as adding more tools in your toolbox. And so how is this, you being outside off the hill for a while has been adding tools to your toolbox and helping you to be a better candidate and a better person for that next job that you're in. As it relates to staying late and leaving or leaving early, I think, it's not just, I'm glad you're asking for the additional work and for doing the extra stuff. I think sometimes it's showing people that you can create your own value. And so whatever issues your member's working on, like, self-teach, learn of everything about like their core pieces of legislation and their core issues, create that own value for yourself if you've got that downtime, self-teach. And, I had an intern or a fellow who worked for me at the Commerce Department. And I would be busy hustling here and there. I think sometimes I would forget that they were there. I would forget to give them a task. They were very good at coming in saying, can I do this? Can I do that? And they had just overheard me kind of like talking about, how we were trying to figure out how the Commerce Secretary had been spending her time by all of the issues she cared about. And this fellow came up to me, I'd been on travel with her, and I was like going through my Tuesday, knock on the door, and they said, look, I started going through the secretary's public schedule to figure out what issues or the time she had been spending on these different issues. And I came up with this chart that said, she spent this amount on tech issues, she spent this amount on like this set of issues and this set of issues just by doing the public schedule. And this was just by them hearing me kind of talk about it. And they went and did this project, and he was like, can I do more for you? Like, to help you do this. And I was like, wow, like that guy, and I went in and took it to the secretary that day, and I said, look, such and such person did this for us here. And as a start, we should do this for your schedule, not just what the public schedule is, but for your entire schedule. And so it just was that project that person did. They took the initiative, they did it, and they were a star for it.
So I will answer the question. The question was, what do you look for on a resume in a communications job? I'm actually looking for, show us something. Show us that you have this experience. We advertised one time for a digital communications manager, somebody to work on social media. We got a ton of resumes, and we went through and got rid of all the resumes where people didn't have their own domain name. Right? So you think about that. You can go right now and search amosneed.com. It's my website. It shows you some things I'm interested in, page, my Twitter feed, and you're probably sitting here like, I can't go create a website. Go to GoDaddy and buy the domain. Go to Bluehost. You can Google teach yourself how to do it. Require some work? Absolutely. You're not probably going to be able to do it overnight. But when you were sending your resume in, when it goes in and it says Amos Sneed, here's my address on Capitol Hill, and you can go to amosneed.com, all of a sudden that's a little different, right? And you're helping yourself stand out from other applicants. And then the campaign experience, when you're sending the email in or you're putting it on your resume, we videos took off. It was featured or Chris Matthews, tell that story. I have kids, and so when we hire babysitters, I go online and figure out who these babysitters are. My wife and I both do it. There's actually services now that will go through babysitters just based on their social media. So we're crazy enough just to do that for our babysitters. I guarantee you, people that you're applying for jobs, they're going to go look and see who you are. Who are you on LinkedIn? Who are you on Twitter? Who are you on Instagram? I'm not private. I mean, don't do some dumb crap. But actually tell that story. If there's something you've done, if there's something you're applying for a job as a communicator, you should be able to tell your own story about yourself. You should be able to find it quickly and easily. That would be my...
More quick thing, because I know Tom's about to yank us, which is I didn't get to plug my book. So my book just came out. It's called West Wingers, Stories from the Dream Chasers, Hope and Change Makers in the Obama White House. The notion really is, and I think this is one thing that I would just leave you with quickly, is that you all bring the perspectives and the experiences that you have from your entire life. I grew up on the border in a small town in New Mexico. That has changed the way that I see the world, and all of you have like a very similar experience. And so that book is primarily about how bringing those perspectives to the places where we sit is really important to how we make policy and the way that policy gets shaped and developed in any number of ways. And so I would just encourage you guys to read that book, because there's really inspiring stories about people who came from really humble beginnings beginnings and worked in the Obama White House and what that means to how policy was made. The last thing I would just say about what Amos said is that in addition to, we live in a virtual world now, so everyone's going to go update their LinkedIn profile tonight and make sure that it matches their resume. Go try and buy your domain site, but also make your resume interactive. So, PDF versions of websites or Word doc versions of resumes, you can hyperlink to things. Like if you help to do a press release and that press release still lives online and that's the thing you're most proud of, add that in there. Because people look at resumes now not just on paper anymore and like as hard copy, they're looking at it online. And if I can see a resume and I can start clicking around to stuff, I'll be like, that's really cool that person did that, right? And so just make it interactive to the extent that you can. And that will also help you to stand out.
All right, I want to call Danae here with Mindspace. I don't know if you're around. Oh, okay. All right. One last thing on just in general that's applicable to I think everyone said. It's really not in this town what you know. I don't care what fancy college you went to or non-fancy college you went to. It's who you know, and networking is the key to getting a job and getting jobs. I didn't follow my own advice. I was with my same boss for 9 years. I didn't network. And then I was like, oh no, I need another job. I hit a ceiling in this office. I didn't network in those 9 years. And I had to wake up and then go network some more. Don't stop networking. You get a job tomorrow, keep on networking. Keep on taking those informational coffees. Go do the thing that you're trying to do with others for other people. Pay it forward. Every coffee someone asks you to take because they're looking for a job, you better take it. And all that karma, that good karma that you give out is going to come back and benefit you in the future. Go meet people that aren't like you. It was not till I met my wife that I knew a lot of Republicans in town. That's ridiculous. This town needs more bipartisanship. You need to understand people not of your same background. So break down barriers, go meet people, don't be shy. It's so hard not to be shy. I want to go home and hang out with my kids, but I got to go to events at night to meet more people and keep on networking. But let me call up our host, Janelby, with Mindspace. They were so wonderful to give us this space for free tonight. Really appreciate it.
I think the mic is taller than me. Hey guys, welcome to Mindspace. Thank you all for coming and spending your time here. I hope that this event was really helpful for you. I definitely learned some things. I'm never going to work on the Hill, but I'm really interested in what you guys are doing. I just wanted to get on here really quickly and let you guys know that you're sitting in Mindspace. This is our first U.S. location. We're headquartered in Tel Aviv and have locations all over Europe and in San Francisco. And if you are looking for an office space after you find your lovely job on the Hill, we would love for you to come in and kind of talk to us about space here. So thank you so much and have a wonderful evening.
One last big thank you to these guys. They took out time in their schedule to do this. Really appreciate it, you guys. And keep an eye on your emails for helpful links. I will get all helpful links from these guys, including their books. And we'll send it out.
And Tom, Amos and I did bring a few books. So if I think we may have 60 books. So if you would like to buy a book and get it signed, Venmo or cash.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you all.